Just days after the International Monetary Fund issued an eye-catching forecast, inflation of 1,000,000% in Venezuela this year, the data on the ground suggests that even that number may turn out to be too low. The price of a cup of coffee measured in Bloomberg's Café con Leche index soared to 2 million bolivars this week from 1,400,000 bolivars the week before. Back in late April, the price was 190,000 bolivars. That 3-month increase equates to an annualized rate of 1,227,638%. The trailing 12-month inflation rate, while still out of control, comes in much lower for now, 86,857%, currency's highest denomination. Now, thanks to rampant hyperinflation, even those are useless. It's crazy to accept notes of 100, 500, or 1,000 bolivars, said Pacheco, a wiry 61-year-old, whose humble stall clings to the fringe of one of the major markets in Ciudad Guayana, a city in Venezuela's southern Bolivar state. He now only accepts newly minted 100,000 bolivar notes, which due to demand are hard to come by. Otherwise it's a box, full of notes, that afterwards we have to take to the bank, he said. Venezuela, inflation could top 1,000,000% by year's end. IMF warrants inflation in the embattled South American country could reach 1,000,000% by December, the International Monetary Fund, IMF, warned this week, reflecting an economic crisis comparable to Germany's after the First World War and Zimbabwe's at the beginning of the last decade. The prediction marks a drastic jump from just last April when the IMF predicted inflation would reach a mere 13,000%. Venezuela, which has the largest proven oil reserves on the planet, is in the midst of a 5-year crisis that has left many of its people unable to afford food and medicine, with shelves bare in supermarkets. Crime rates continue to set records, with local residents fearful to leave the house at night. Alejandro Werner, the head of the IMF's Western Hemisphere Department, elaborated on the grim prognosis. We expect the government to continue to run wide fiscal deficits financed entirely by an expansion in base money, he wrote in a blog post on Monday night, which will continue to fuel an acceleration of inflation as money demand continues to collapse. For Venezuelans, everyday life has become a struggle to survive. The minimum wage is 5 bolivars a month, which at the official rate is approximately £31, $41. But very few people have access to that rate in practice, and resort to the black market where they get about £1. We are millionaires, but we are poor, said May Aguilida Oranaz, a 43-year-old nurse, who says her minimum wage is barely enough to buy a kilogram of meat to feed her children. We can just about eat, but if some health emergency happens we'll die because the prices of medicines are sky-high and rise every day. Many blame the country's woes on President Nicolas Maduro, who in turn alleges that Venezuela is on the receiving end of an economic war waged by the United States and Europe. A box of bolivars in a border supermarket. A box of bolivars in a border supermarket. Photograph, Jonathan Watts for The Guardian. Despite spiraling hyperinflation, Maduro has continued to tighten his grip on the power he inherited from Hugo Chavez, Venezuela's late leader, whose charisma carried him through tough times. Maduro, who lacks his mentor's charm, won a second 6-year term in elections held in May, though opposition politicians in many countries say the result was illegitimate. Maduro has alleged that private bankers are smuggling cash into neighboring Colombia as part of an elaborate conspiracy to sabotage the economy, and he has rejected calls to lift currency controls. One of Maduro's plans to alleviate inflation is to issue new banknotes with the last 3 zeros lopped off, though economists say that will do little to help. It's a cosmetic solution that won't do anything, said Asdrubal Oliveros, director of Ecoanalítica, a Caracas-based economics consultancy. With inflation this wild, in a few months we'll be back in the same situation. Cash crunch, how Venezuela inadvertently became a cashless economy. Unlike in 1920s Germany, people in today's Venezuela are not carrying wheelbarrows of cash to buy groceries. Instead, they have turned to electronic transactions. But 40% of Venezuelans do not have bank accounts, while others are unwilling to use credit cards or Bitcoin to pay for smaller items, so bartering has become common. The paradox is that this is a country undergoing a deep inflation crisis and yet nobody actually has any cash, said Jeff Ramsey, Assistant Director for Venezuela at the Washington Office on Latin America, a DC-based think tank. You're seeing wealthy people pay for parking with granola bars. Hit particularly hard are pensioners who receive their monthly payments in cash. Sala Ponte, a 73-year-old retiree, currently buys half a carton of eggs with 2,100,000 bolivar notes. At the end of the year, if they pay the pension in cash, we will have to go with a wheelbarrow to buy the same half a carton, he said outside a shopping mall in the city center. Fed up with economic despair, masses of Venezuelans are simply fleeing. More than 1 million have arrived in Colombia, where, in the border city of Cucuta, some entrepreneurial Venezuelans have begun weaving valueless banknotes into handbags that sell for 20,000 Colombian pesos, approximately £5. People walk past empty shelves at a supermarket in Caracas in January. Photograph, Marco Bello. Reuters experts say that Venezuela's vast potential wealth will not give the country a lifeline. The country's oil industry is beset with bad management, a lack of investment, cash flow problems and a crumbling infrastructure. The U.S. Energy Information Administration, IA, predicts that oil production could fall to 1 million barrels per day, BPD, this year, and again to 700,000 by December 2019. Venezuela's problems are so profound that even the increase in crude prices can't improve its industry's situation, Lesley Viller, an AI analyst told a local website on Tuesday. They don't have trained personnel, they don't have rigs or parts. Back in Ciudad Guyana, Elisa Gonzalez, a homemaker, relies on handouts sent from a sister that moved to Peru. I don't know how much longer we can survive like this, Gonzalez said, adding that she had to put 2 daughters through school. With or without a job, what you earn isn't enough to pay your kids' school fees. And feeding yourself is mission impossible. Some analysts are hoping that the dizzying inflation rates could precipitate an end to Maduro's regime. History tells that the governments that bring us inflation aren't usually the ones to get us out of it, said Oliveros at Ecoanalytica. Venezuela is regrettably headed for a lot of economic and political instability, even towards ungovernability, but there could be a political transition at that point, said Oliveros. It would be very disorganized, of course, but in the end it would be a transition, just days after the International Monetary